We should be fine though. Well, it's just a quick combo. Ready when you are.
Harry, do you work, pal? Or are you skipping out a little bit like us, like me? Ryan, you're not working right now, right?
No, I work tomorrow. Then that'll be my last day that'll be my last day for like 2 weeks. I just finished up my summer class yesterday, so now I officially have the degree.
Nice, man. That's great. You finished early, right? You didn't have to like make up a
I did it in 3 years.
Yeah, I thought so. That's just making sure everybody knows you're not an idiot. You're smart.
I'm just more thrilled that today actually feels like the first day of summer for me, that I truly can just exist and have nothing hanging over my head of an assignment due.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I remember those days for sure.
Those days are fleeting, but I'll enjoy them while I have them.
Exactly, as you should. All right, I'm gonna hit record and we'll hit it off.
Sounds good. Jump right in.
Welcome to the USL show. It's brought to you by the Beautiful Game Network and sponsored by Roughneck Scarves. We're doing a quick live show. It's going to be short, maybe 30 minutes max. And I don't know if you listened the other day, but I did an interview with Sam Stayskool from The Athletic on his piece about reserve squads or two teams, MLS Suicides, however you want to say it. The possibility of them being forced to move down to League One next year, I believe. So, Ryan, I think you wanted to kind of start with all the possibilities of that move if it were to happen, right?
Yeah. So I think I see kind of like a weird, like four different scenarios that you could see going forward. The first one being that nothing happens and the system stays how it is. The two teams stay up in the championship, and the ones who choose to go to League One choose to go to League One. The second possibility is the one that was mentioned in the Athletic article, of basically saying all the two teams would be forced into League One. So that'd be your New York Red Bull 2, Timbers 2. A third one would be a more case-by-case situation where it would be up to each club on their own to decide if it would be right for them to move down, because I do believe there are some MLS Suicides who deserve to be playing at the highest possible level and some who probably would be better suited in League One. And then there's the weird situation of you do the true two sides, like those Baby Bulls or Timbers, to force them into League One. And then you have the situation of the hybrid clubs, namely RGV and Reno, who are hybrids to Houston and San Jose, respectively. Do you keep them up and drop the other MLS Suicides down? But those are like the four scenario outcomes I see playing out.
Yeah, I'm going to hit it right off the top. The most important thing that I wanted to say today, which is I think there's a distinction that people are missing in that article. And I think it's really vital that as far as USL is concerned, they don't care if you are a two side or if an indie side. This isn't them picking out the two sides, pointing at them and saying, all of you are out of here because we don't like you. This is more so if you don't meet the USL requirements, then you aren't going to stay, whether you're a two side or not. And I think it's really vital that people know that. I think where they're confusing it is that MLS is saying, it's seeming like MLS is saying it's all or nothing. So if you send one of our teams down, we're going to take everybody down. And then, who knows what happens after that. So USL doesn't really care who stays or who goes, just as long as you meet their requirements. And I guess you can make the argument that USL's requirements are forcing certain teams and they're picking and choosing in a way, I suppose. But that's one thing I definitely wanted to make clear. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on that? Or do you want to talk about what you would prefer yourself?
I mean, it's perfectly fair to have these requirements. If the Soccer Federation has requirements for league standards, then it requires teams to be upholding those standards. I mean, it happens that the MLS two sides don't really uphold a lot of those standards, but there are those who make those attempts to do so. Real Monarchs have their own place, so that's one team that at least is making an attempt to put out a good product. But it's well within USL's rights to have these teams, or force them to uphold a certain standard if you want to, or basically raise the standard of the entire league. So I think in my perfect situation, it would be a case by case, and you would decide by each team which ones deserve to go down. Because, namely, I mentioned Real Monarchs, but the Baby Bulls, who have won USL before, and Portland Timbers, too, are three sides I think are well deserving of staying up.
Yeah, I think my favorite is Real Monarchs. Really put a lot of money into that training facility, and so they deserve to stay. And their attendance went up a little bit when they did that, and it's a separate crowd. It's not RSL crowd. It's a Monarchs crowd. And so if their stadium meets the requirements, and as far as I know, it does, I think they should stay. And what was another one? Tacoma Defiance is a tough one for me because their level of play is pretty terrible, as we've seen, and the way that they use their team is not something you want to see in the championship. But then again, they have the highest attendance of all the two sides with, averaging 2,000 or more. And they moved to it's a baseball stadium, but they're having a go of it. They are very close to being a hybrid team like Reno and RGV, which Harry Austin logged in and kind of said that Reno and RGV are completely different from the others. So I don't know, Ryan, what would you think about the hybrids, or do you disagree with any of my two side comments there?
No, I think it's fair, and kind of bounce off of what you said with Tacoma. They're exploring options to build their own stadium in Tacoma that would also host the kind of Seattle Rain. I think of the NWSL. Well, but I think it's perfectly fair. Like, we could very well see a future where we would see a bunch of the two sides be forced into more of a hybrid role and like be placed in other markets outside. But it also depends on, does the team want that? Because there are some MLS sides that they want to keep their MLS two sides and all their players as close as they can to the first team as possible. You could argue that's one of the reasons why the Baby Bulls have been so successful, because their two side is working so closely with the first team. You may not get that same benefit if you had placed the Baby Bulls down in Atlantic City or in Long Island or something like that. Or you also heard rumors of like Timbers 2 going out to Boise, and you may not get that same benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. But as far as championships concerned, as a USL fan, I really want this to happen because of that. I really want, for me, let's talk about the hybrids for a second here first, because Reno and RGV have plenty of team players coming from the first team. They are different in the way they operate, but they have a separate staff that deals with the game day operations, that deals with the marketing and the sales, and they put a decent effort into having a good game day situation. Obviously, Reno has a great team. RGV is kind of up and down, so they're different. But I do see this as a loophole where perhaps if a two side cares enough and they don't like going down to League One, they can probably pop back up by just becoming a hybrid side. Or even if MLS doesn't force them to stay down, if they don't use them as collective bargaining, then perhaps they can not change into a hybrid and even move up just as a two side again, but actually put time and effort into all the game day and the stadium and all those sort of things. But yeah, I think you mentioned Red Bulls. Go ahead, Ryan, though. You had something to say.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that everyone kind of, it just grinds their gears about the MLS Suicides, is that we see all these independent clubs being held. It almost seems like you see them being held to a different standard of the two sides just based off of the nature of the club. Like, you're seeing in New Mexico, Indy 11 pulling these massive attended games, and then you look over at the Red Bulls, who would bring in a couple hundred people a match, and it's just a very disparaging look, and it's different. And I think there was also a follow-up tweet that said that none of the MLS two sides paid an expansion fee, whereas the independent clubs all did.
That's huge, because we do need to make sure this is where we're not shills, because we're going to mention this and it's really, really important. We're not going to hit on these topics enough, to be honest with you, but I do want to mention that it is vital that that everyone knows and acknowledges that MLS two sides saved the league, perhaps gave it more legitimacy. I'm not sure the USL would be around today if it wasn't for them. And so a lot of people were arguing that point and talking about all the upgrades they've been forced to make to try to stay in the championship. Some have done that and some have not. But if teams have put a lot of money in, they're right. They deserve to stay. And if they meet the requirements, I think they should stay. But one thing I was surprised to hear in the arguments, after a lot of those arguments, that there's no expansion fee from these two sides. to me, that was like the final straw where I was like, I really don't care. They should all go if they don't meet the requirements.
Yeah, it should all be down to the requirements. And I think overall, all the off the pitch stuff is what it is. We've seen it even with the independent clubs that they have varying degrees of successful off pitch things, stadium requirements, attendance, whatever. Or at the end of the day, it will most likely, I think it should come down to on field competitiveness. If the goal of these academies is to basically win games by building up the players and the academies that you have. And if they're not doing that successfully at the championship level, they'll go to a level they think they can. Red Bulls, too, can do that successfully at the championship. Yes, they won the USL when it was a D3 league, but they are still competing. They're still among the best teams in the Eastern Conference right now. If you look at the Portland Timbers, too, they're still a top 4 team in the West. Don't you think those teams at least deserve a chance if they're competing well with these independent sides? Don't you think they deserve to stay up at this independent level?
I think it has to be both. I think you have a great point, and I would hate to send Red Bull packing. I would hate to send the new Timbers too that we've been seeing. I'd hate to send them packing. But if they have 200 people on game day and they haven't even tried to put together a solid week in, week out stadium with training, or sorry, with changing facilities, a locker room, if they don't put time and effort into the business side of things, then I think that's still a deal breaker. Let them go down to League One and destroy everyone and let their game day, let their player talent level maybe fall a little bit, because there's a standard now. Championship wants to be a real league. And even though their game day talent is there, the game day attendance is not there. The game day environment is not there. And to me, it has to be at least a little bit of both.
And for every good MLS Suicide, we've seen the poor ones. I mean, you already saw the situation of Bethlehem when they were working out outside of a fire festival events for that one game. But it also, like, this is a good segue. Like, we've already talked about it. Like, how excited would you be as a League One fan to receive these teams? You already have problems with Orlando B down there, and North Texas have at least been dominating the league. But would you be like, if you were an MLS Suicide and you were kicked out of the championship and dropped into League One, would that encourage you to spend more or improve the side, or would you see quality drop even further if they're playing at a lower league?
I don't know. I think the big thing I've brought up is that, FC Dallas has North Texas SC in League One. And we've already seen, I think that was the big question. I think this is why some two sides are probably going to be okay with going to League One. It's not going to bother them that much, because North Texas has shown that Cervania and Ricardo Pepi have been able to move straight from League One to MLS without any trouble. They've been fine in MLS. Now, would they be better if they were playing in championship week in, week out? I think that's debatable for sure. But I do think North Texas has given us, the footwork. They've done the footwork for everybody to show that it is fine. You can do League One and still be fine. But I'm biased. If you were to ask that question, Ryan, I'm biased. If I was running a club and I was a 2 side, let's say I was RB 2, I would, if I'm talented, I would spend the money, have a good training facility, and put work into. I would meet the USL requirements so that I could stay, especially because it's so vital to that team, especially for the MLS side. They use RB2 in a way that no other team does. And, I think it would help them and hurt them the most to move down. What do you think about that, though?
I think it would hurt RB2 to move down. Pony made the comment on his Twitter that if you're going to force them down, they're going to very well run away at the league until they run into North Texas and score 200 goals on everyone. And it seems like it's just not being beneficial to that level. And if they're trying to challenge themselves and push themselves to be the best possible side they can, it would be at the USL Championship level. But if you're looking at, like, say you're a fan of the Triumph or Red Wolves or Tormenta, now you've had your entire league filled out with a bunch of other MLS two sides. Are you going to be as excited about, you can deal with the occasional game against Orlando B or North Texas, but now if you're going to be playing an MLS two side week in and week out, are you going to be as excited about trips to Atlanta United 2 or Orlando B, Bethlehem, all of these teams day after day?
Yeah, League One fun guys mentioned that for sure, and someone else did in League One. It it is a worry, and I know for sure at the beginning of League One, I was kind of asking around about what teams were going to be there this year and who was going to drop because I kind of wanted this to happen. And it was really important to the league office. They said a couple times, they said our independent clubs in League One will outnumber our reserve clubs in League One. And so they wanted to make sure that was the case. I think even next year, they're going to hope or try to make that the case. And the other thing is that we've heard the number thrown around multiple times. I just hung out with Ryan Madden, and he mentioned it again that if USL, they're throwing around these numbers of 40 in championship, 40 teams in League One as well. If that happens, you do not need to worry about the two sides being in League One. You could throw every single one down there, and you're still going to have more independent sides than you are going to have two sides. So, yeah, it may be awkward for a while, but I do think long term they'll be okay. But you have a good point. What does this do to League One? Does it make it less legitimate? Does it make it annoying for clubs to stay down there? So I agree with you.
Yeah, and it just going forward, it'll be a period of growing pains, and we are trying to attract teams into the league. It's going to be more of like, okay, what regional rivals can we attract? I mean, you're bringing in Omaha, and if you're dropping all the MLS Suicides down, then it already becomes Swope is now their closest opponent, followed like closely around by like Madison. And it's no secret that the games against other independent sides is going to attract more fans than playing teams or playing like an MLS Suicide, especially if you're having a smaller league and you're playing these sides a lot more often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Something that we have to mention is Harry made the really perfect point that maybe the Open Cup rule being somewhat of a drawing line, where if your roster is controlled by a senior club, then you're ineligible for the Open Cup. He cites that Reno has enough control that they're allowed to play in the Open Cup, whereas RGV, even though they're a hybrid side, is not allowed to. He mentioned Tucson is not allowed to because they have not enough control of their own roster. So, man, that's a really good point, Harry, that's a good drawing line or something maybe comparable that USL Championship can look at drawing the line between Championship and League One. I also wonder, I don't know, I wonder if more teams might be eligible for Open Cup if they just drop down to League One and we do form more hybrid sides. I don't know. That's something that it's maybe a long shot, but anyway, a good drawing line there. Right, Ryan?
Yeah, and Harry made an excellent point. He's right that RGV doesn't have this full control of their roster, while Reno does, and that's why Reno is able to continue keep competing in the Open Cup. So that may be a very good just metric to kind of measure clubs against. That if you're qualifying for this, you're more than worthy of staying up in championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's most of what we wanted to talk about today. I'm trying to think of more questions to ask. Harry, chime in real quick if you can, if you have more to talk about. You brought up NISA, which is, I don't know if we'll dig into that today, but
43 days and counting.
Look at that. They've got a schedule now for their season. It's a little bit weak, but maybe if they got over the hump, then it's going to be they'll pick up some momentum now and actually become a legit league in a couple of years. That's good for me. I'm happy with that. But, how does that affect League One? You don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big point is if you were, say, an independent club looking at NISA and League One, and you like if travel was like no matter, because if you're like coming out of Des Moines, Boise, any of these markets that don't currently have a side, and you're looking at both leagues, would the MLS playing a bunch of MLS two sides deter you from being in that league to playing in NISA, which is claiming no expansion fees, and you're playing all these other independent teams?
Yeah, that's the part I don't think about enough. That NISA is about as pure as it gets. If you want, just a soccer league, no expansion fees is giant. And so hopefully they can get it together. That's the other side. No expansion fees. If they can do no expansion fees and get their stuff together as a league, that's going to be hard to beat. And so I think that's their best chance of taking out League One. We'll see.
Yeah, but I think that pretty much kind of covered the entire topic, though.
I agree. Ryan, thanks for joining me for this little short one. We need to do this more often. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's fun. Definitely something to look into going forward, of just like a USL, I guess you call them USL tidbits or stuff like that.
Yeah, little snippets. Perfect. And we also should say thanks to Sam Stayskill for coming on the show for that interview. Make sure you go back and listen to that because it really does nail down all the details. And if you're a little bit foggy on some details, just listen to that while you're working or something, and you'll be a little bit better off before you go tweeting some things. But yeah, thanks to him not only for coming on the show, but for writing the article. I'm really cool that the Athletic's been doing so much work with the USL lately.
Yeah, it only helps benefit the league.
Without a doubt. All right, everybody. Have a good one. We'll talk to you next week for sure, either Tuesday or Thursday. It's going to be in flux for a while, but it'll work out. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.